So to wrap up our discussion of hydroxychloroquine and how after a number of studies showing it's not helping patients and in fact may be hurting, Trump is no longer talking about it. Fox News is barely talking about it. Both Dr. Phil, who is a psychologist, not a medical doctor, and Dr. Oz, who is a medical doctor but is widely known for promoting quack cures, both of them have been saying anti-science things about the virus. But Dr. Oz has been particularly present as a promulgator of chloroquine miracle treatment type nonsense for many weeks now. We now have a study I told you about from the VA, which says this isn't working well. It might be hurting patients. Now, credit to Fox and Friends. They actually did a story this morning about that study, and they brought on Dr. Oz. Let's take a look.
All right, so let's move on to hydroxychloroquine. They did a study, a limited study at a VA hospital, and they came to the conclusion it did no benefit, and they still had 19 deaths. What's your reaction to that, since we've all been doing heavy work to find out if this works or not?
So I hate to already be jumping in so quickly, but Brian Kilmeade is already rewriting history. Brian Kilmeade says, we've been doing heavy work to find out if this works or if it doesn't work. No, dude. You've been promoting the drug just like Trump has. Now that it's not working, he's rewriting history to say, we've been investigating with an open mind. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. No, that's not what you were doing. You're rewriting history. Let's now go to Dr. Oz.
Well, the VA study looked at older and quite a bit sicker patients, all male patients in their hospitals, and they showed that the drug by itself didn't help and might harm that population. As you know, there have been other studies. Then the VA study was retrospective. They looked back to see what had happened because they weren't gathering the data at the time that they were actually giving the medications. Studies that have done this prospectively, so looking forward and giving it as collecting data as they're going along, like in France or the randomized trials from China, have shown benefits, but only really when it's given earlier to patients.
So Dr. Oz mentions all the reasons we might not be able to trust this new study. It was only male patients. Well, that's actually good. In most good studies, you look at only men or only women to eliminate sex as a possible factor that affects the results of the treatment. It was retrospective. Well, many of the studies that are being done are, but the most disturbing thing is that Dr. Oz mentions that French study. The French study Dr. Oz mentions as a counterpoint had under 40 participants and no control group. The VA study at least had close to a sample size of 400. And again, Dr. Oz could just tell the truth and say every study so far has had some issues, but this is a bigger study and it doesn't look good. Instead, Dr. Oz says, well, you know, you've got this study and you've also got the French study with the 36 or the 38 patients with no control group. And he says that one looked good, even if this one doesn't. Very dishonest. He also mentions studies from China that look good. I won't even comment on that now because later in the segment, Oz himself says we really need data from the United States. If we need US data, why even bring up the Chinese study? Now, in this next segment, he actually does say the right thing, which is what I've been saying all along.
The fact of the matter is, we don't know. Thankfully, these medications are prescription only, so doctors are desperately awaiting the completion of the higher quality randomized trials. And you've covered them on the show several times. South Dakota, University of Minnesota now has over 1,000 patients randomized. There's additional trials going on. Let's get that data so we know what we're dealing with.
So that would have been the right thing to say all along, which is we just have to wait. Dr. Fauci said we need randomized controlled trials. Until we have those, we really don't know. That's what they should have been saying from day one. A little bit more here, where Brian Kilmeade introduces the Z-Pack element, which may actually make the treatment even more dangerous. And Dr. Oz just white flags and says, we've really just got to wait for the RCTs.
And just to follow up real quick on hydroxychloroquine,
let's go ahead and get the...
isn't it important to know what they're combining it with and the dosage? Because it's not supposed to be taken on its own. Don't you have the Z-Pack?
Yeah.
There's a lot of variables, Brian. I got to say, I think at this point there's so much data coming from so many places. We are better off waiting for the randomized trials Dr. Fauci has been asking for. Otherwise, we keep reacting back and forth for studies that show opposite results. And a lot of it might have to do with when you get the medication. If you give it to people who are already having breathing tubes down their throat, it's not going to have the same kind of effect as if you give it early. But we don't have randomized data from the United States to educate us well enough right now.
So again, if Dr. Oz had said this on April 1st, I would be praising Dr. Oz. I would be saying, hey, you know what? When Trump was promoting it and you had just this French study to tout, even though it had 38 people in it, if then Dr. Oz said, Fauci's right, we've just got to wait, I would have respected him from day one. Instead, Dr. Oz and Fox and Trump have all been promoting this. And this would have been the thing to say then, rather than to spend 3 weeks promoting it, only to now say, you know, you really need randomized controlled trials. It's pathetic. And with every passing day, hydroxychloroquine is a word that is harder and harder to find, both coming out of Donald Trump's mouth and coming out of Fox News broadcasting. Really pathetic. We've been saying it from day one, and they actually have been spreading dangerous disinformation all along. We'll have more about this change intact when it comes to chloroquine on the David Pakman Show Instagram page. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at David Pakman Show. If you ever feel like you just don't have enough time to read all the books you want to read, you have to check out one of my favorite apps called Blinkist. Blinkist takes thousands of popular nonfiction books and distills each one down into an ebook or audiobook that you can get through in just 15 minutes, where you're getting all the key takeaways from the book. Just imagine how you'll be able to expand your horizons and knowledge by being able to soak up all of the important insights from 10 different books in an afternoon. Obviously, it's perfect for exposing yourself to a new book you otherwise wouldn't have time for, or you can use it to revisit a book you've already read, or use it to preview a book before you buy the full version and read it. I recently read A Brief History of Time, of course, by the great Stephen Hawking. This is a book that I have been aware of for so long, and other things got in the way, and it was fantastic to check it out on Blinkist. Blinkist has books on politics, philosophy, science. They have 27 different nonfiction categories, and a subscription is only about $8 a month, and you get the entire library. But you can try it totally free and get 25% off a subscription when you go to Blinkist.com/Pakman. I've put the link right underneath this video.